Hello and welcome to The Current Thing with me, Nick Dixon. And in these very dark times, with the horrific political assassination of Charlie Kirk and the equally horrific response from so many people, teachers, professors, doctors, pilots, students, and of course the media playing their usual games, it has got a lot of us asking, what is this evil that we see? And I thought it'd be great to discuss this with our friend, the Reverend Dr. Jamie Franklin. Jamie, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Nick. It's good to be on. You always bring a sense of happiness and fun into my life when I talk to you. But unfortunately, obviously, we're talking about quite dark things today. So I think it's going to be a mix this time.
Yeah, well, I thought of you because, well, one, you messaged me about it, but also, this was a Christian who was terribly killed. And then the response to it has been so horrific that it's got people like me even saying these are demons, and this is a word I reach for, a word that Alex Jones had used many times to try and explain this response. But of course, there are political reasons for it. These people have been brainwashed over years and years to completely dehumanize their enemies. They have no idea about the real person. They've heard a quote. Even people like Alistair Campbell very irresponsibly said, "Oh, it's terrible," but this guy did advocate stoning gays to death. Like,
yeah, it's not true.
How on earth could a person be that popular, have a million followers, and be part of a sort of Trump's inner circle? And he thinks that as you've got a completely deranged view of the world. It couldn't even possibly be true. Stephen King said the same, was forced to apologize.
Yeah.
Even he actually apologized, which is incredibly rare. But we've seen this. I mean, we're all still reeling, the people I know, from the event itself. There's a mixture of grief and anger, but then this response on top of it. So what was your view of that?
Well, I mean, there's so much to say, isn't there? I didn't know Alistair Campbell had said that, but I knew Stephen King had said it. I'm really disappointed with Stephen King, I have to say, because I read his book on writing a few years ago and I thought, oh, this is great. And then I followed him on Twitter and it was just like this horrible sort of toxic cesspit of this sort of thing. So disappointing. But yeah, I mean, in general, I think, my sort of start of a 10, I suppose, is that, you have these moments every once in a while in life where something genuinely shocks you. You thought things were a certain way. COVID was like that for me. You thought things were a certain way, and then you see something new, and it's actually really, really shocking. And in this case, quite worrying, I think. So what was new for me? It wasn't that there would be a political assassination of a conservative Christian in America, although that is shocking. We've seen these sorts of things happen before. The attempted assassination of Trump is obviously the nearest analog to it. It's the response, which is just, it's like one of those things where it just leaves you speechless, because it's not just they're only, one or two people justifying it or celebrating it. It's that it's literally all over the internet. I mean, this is all quite, this is developing as we speak, isn't it? So this stuff it becomes old news really quickly. But I think it was yesterday, there was this video of Bob Villan, this awful guy who suddenly, for some reason, became famous because he was at Glastonbury saying these terrible things. Now he's, calling Charlie Kirk a piece of shit and celebrating his death and saying, I think he said, if you chat shit, you're going to get banged. The audience there, apparently an audience of 1,500 people celebrating. Another example I'd give is I looked on the newsagents, a video by the newsagents. I couldn't actually bring myself to watch the video. I watched about 3 seconds of it. But then I looked at all the comments, and again, it's all like the same sort of thing. Maybe not people celebrating Charlie's murder, but actually justifying it, and it just completely missing the point which you would have thought would just be absolutely obvious to everyone, which is that this is an absolutely horrendous evil that is completely unacceptable regardless of what he thought about anything. But then you get these literally hundreds, there may have even been thousands of comments on that video, just all people saying the same thing. Oh yeah, well, he thought this, he thought that. And you just think, what kind of reaction is that to somebody being murdered? A young father of two, what kind of reaction is that to someone being murdered? It's like these people must be, they must have lost touch with their humanity in a really significant way. And another thing, it's sort of, I mean, I sort of thought this already, and I'd be interested to know what you think about this, but there have been people saying, well, you know, it's not just coming from the left, it's also coming from the right as well. There are people who do this on the right. And for number one, I don't think it's true. Like factually, I don't think it's true. But I suppose the further thought I had about that is that that kind of thing puts you into a kind of binary where you sort of feel like you have to defend people who are on the ostensible other side of the political spectrum to these lunatics on the progressive left. But I suppose my sort of fresh thought in this is that even accepting the frame of that debate, the terms of that debate, is not legitimate, because it's not like there's just, you know, a bunch of lunatics on the progressive left and then the equivalent on the conservative right. It's like this ideology, whatever it is, I mean, you can call it various different things. I think the best way of thinking about it in terms of clarity is to call it a kind of neo-Marxism, a particular type of woke neo-Marxism or something like that. But that's not the equivalent to something on the right. Like there's some kind of mirror image on the right over there, and both of these groups have a problem. There is a demonic, evil, ultimately violent, murderous ideology which is abroad in our society. Full stop. There's no equivalent on the other side of the political spectrum. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think it's almost like we have to reject that. I don't have to defend conservatives or people on the right or anything like that, or even Christianity. So that's ultimately what I'm promoting. You know, I'm a vicar after all. But that's irrelevant, really. It's not relevant. So don't bring it into the conversation. What I'm doing is I'm saying that this thing over here is completely evil. And there might be lots of people who are inculcated by it, who haven't got to the point of being thoroughly corrupted by it. I'm sure that's true. But the fruit of it is this, you know, it's violence and it's murder. And it doesn't even matter that, you know, well, it's only happened a couple of times or whatever people might want to say about this. It's now created a new situation. I mean, in the US, but, you know, to a certain extent in other countries as well, where people are going to think twice about speaking in public because they might be assassinated. So, you know, I mean, what are we supposed to do? That are we supposed to just ignore that and say, oh, well, it's just a couple of deranged lunatics and the right does the same thing, so it doesn't matter. Do you see what I mean? I think we have to reject the whole framework that's being foisted on us here and say, this thing is evil. It has to be denounced, and there's no room for it in, well, I mean, a civilized society, but I don't really believe that we're a civilized society. But you know what I mean? There should just be no acceptance of it, no toleration of it whatsoever.
Absolutely. Yeah, so several things there. I mean, one is an attempt by people who I believe are struggling with their cognitive dissonance and with their inner shame, to not the fully demonic ones who are just lost, but the David Baddiel types who today said, as we record, said it's this guy was radicalized on far right Reddit, and it's like Reddit's not a far right platform; it's a far left platform.
What, he's saying that about Charlie Kirk?
No, the killer.
The killer, yeah, the killer was on a Reddit kid. That's what's being provoked.
Yes, but it's not 4chan. Yeah, he said the celebration of an assassination by someone the identitarian left. He admitted that part. Even as it becomes clearer that the killer was meme-soaked in the Reddit culture of the online right, only serves to clarify how very adjacent these categorizations now are. So he completely wrong, went for a kind of horseshoe theory, because he can't just say, wow, there's a problem with the people I kind of vaguely, tacitly am on the side of. He might not be as radical as some of on the left, but a lot of radical lefties are struggling now because all the media are part of it, and anyone who shares that ideology. Our own prime minister couldn't say what a woman was. That was a capitulation to that same ideology that has this now basically a terrorist wing to it. I see them as terrorists. I don't really see, and this idea that it was the far right. Obviously, you know, the fact they spent 2 days celebrating it, then they go, oh, by the way, it was you guys. No, I mean, people saying it was Groypers. Of course, it wasn't. It's factually incorrect. But and Nick Fuentes actually, as a Christian, immediately did a tribute to, even though he's feuded with Charlie Kirk throughout his life. He said Charlie Kirk didn't say anything nice about me, but I will say something nice about him. So he was completely different, because although his opinions would be considered far right, he still was a Christian who wouldn't believe in this. So as you say, even you can actually go as far right as you like. There isn't really this, even on the Fuentes right, even though he's like very anti-Israel and people say anti-Semitic and so on, but there still isn't a desire to hurt or kill people. It's just not there, as you say. So there is no equivalent. It's
There's not. It's true. Sorry, can I just come in on that? So I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think
no.
the point. I mean, in some ways, it's really helpful to dig into the ideas that are behind these things and to explain why these things happen and why it's not going on the right. It's because these are essentially, as I say, they're neo-Marxist. They're inculcated by a neo-Marxist ideology, whether they're aware of this or not, where they're basically told there are essentially two groups of people. There are good people and there are evil people, and you are part of the good group, and you are oppressed, and the bad people are oppressing you, and they've got all the power, and the only way to stop this from happening is to overthrow them. You know, that's what it is. That's what's behind it. That's why this violence is happening. It's because they've been told that violence is the only solution. And you saw it with this Oxford University president. I don't actually know his name, but the guy who...
The incoming president of the union, George, I can never pronounce the name, but it begins with an A.
Yeah, exactly. Who's a diversity hire, whatever you want to call it. He got ABB. He shouldn't even be going to Oxford in the first place. But anyway, the point is that he... At an Oxford Union debate, there is footage of him saying exactly what I just said, literally exactly what I just said, but as a proponent of it. So that's why that's happening. It's not happening on the other side. Like there's nothing embedded in, well, let's put it this way. There's nothing intrinsically embedded in a conservative political philosophy that justifies violence. There's just not the equivalent to that kind of justification, which is on the radical left, which is baked into both Marxist and neo-Marxist ideology. You read the Communist Manifesto. It's right there all the way through it. Violent revolution in order to overthrow the bourgeoisie. In this case, it's in order to overthrow the white conservative middle class, Christian, whatever. That's why the violence is happening. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think
I was in the pause anyway because I was overwhelmed by the amount of things to talk about and the horror of it all. But it's great that you mentioned, because I was going to mention this awful kid at the Oxford Union. So he said that. So my reasoning is, he said in a debate that he believes in political violence. Yeah, we know this is not an abstract concern for him because he celebrated an actual assassination of someone he had met and debated as a guest of the Union. Therefore, Oxford now refuses to punish him and releases these mealy-mouthed, horrendous letters mentioning racism and trying to defend him. Therefore, surely they are tacitly defending political assassinations, are they not? I say prescribe Oxford as a terrorist organization, Oxford University, and that's my position. Yeah. Why are they not? Explain to me why they're not. I mean, they believe in political assassinations. They're not punishing the guy. And do you know who else has been incredibly pathetic? Is Lord Young and Lord Hannon. These are our alleged lords, both defending this. Toby Young says he shouldn't be punished, penalized, this kid, because it was free speech. Daniel Hannon says the same, but says he should stand down. What are the views? Daniel Hannon says about his views. I keep hearing this about his views. Camillo Tomine also said views. What is the view? He celebrated a murder and said, lol, let's effing go. Explain to me the view being expressed there. A controversial view is Churchill was the actual villain of the Second World War. Mao did more good than harm, as Diane Abbott once said on BBC. Like, these are controversial views, and I say, okay, let's debate them, because I am very much a free speech sort of person. But a view is not, I think innocent people should be murdered. And if it is a view, it's certainly not a view we can have in any functioning society. But even people like Toby Young are so confused morally. They're going, no, we have to allow this. No, we don't have to allow this. And by the way, even if we don't prosecute him, which I'm not even suggesting, because I'm Mr. Liberal here, I'm not even saying they should be arrested. But guess what I am saying? You can't be at Oxford University, an elite university, if you believe people should be murdered, innocent people should be brutally murdered. You're telling me you have to be at Oxford University with that view? You wouldn't be in my five-a-side football team. You wouldn't be in a gentleman's club. You wouldn't be at the golf club. What are you talking about? Of course you shouldn't be at Oxford, an elite university, or once elite university before it became a terrorist training cell. You shouldn't be at Oxford University with that view. Am I going completely insane here?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you could very well see like somebody being expelled from their secondary school for doing something like that, couldn't you? So how much more?
A lot less.
Well, yeah, a lot less.
It's behavior. It's not a view. If he killed someone, would he be the union president? And if he punched one of the guests, which I don't even think would be as bad necessarily, that might even be. There's obviously behavior that is worth expelling people for. If this is not it, what is?
I think that's the key, isn't it? It's a behavior. It's
a
something.
behavior.
It's something he's done rather than a view that he holds, which is controversial. And with the Toby Young thing, I didn't actually dig into that. But was he saying that he shouldn't be punished, or was he saying that he shouldn't be prevented from becoming the Oxford Union, the head of the Oxford Union? What was he actually saying?
He said he shouldn't be penalised. That's free speech. I'll try and find it if you want. It's a complete. It's quite weird because Toby's chairman of the. Now think about Toby, like
Free Speech Union. Yeah.
He can be changed on these things. I know from doing a podcast with him. He can have his mind changed. Sometimes he hasn't thought it through, and he can go, "Yeah, you're right," and things like this. He's not a bad person, but he's completely horribly wrong. George Aberrayoni, I still don't know how to pronounce it, is clearly a foolish man, and people are rightly criticising him for celebrating Charlie Kirk's death. But he should not be penalised by the Oxford Union or the university for saying something offensive but perfectly lawful. That's free speech. I just think that's
nonsense.
This is someone who wants to kill you. And you're like, guys, what about his free speech? What is the speech? The speech, death to you and anyone like you. That's not speech.
Mm-hmm. And I think with the university, it might be slightly more debatable. But with the Oxford Union, it's supposed to be a place where debate is encouraged. It's one of the foremost debating halls in the world, isn't it? So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have somebody who celebrates political violence, political murder, being the head of the Oxford Union, because he's supposed to be a guardian of this great institution of civilized debate. So I think that's deeply incongruous.
Yeah.
And as you say,
on the union part,
Yeah.
absolutely. You can't be the incoming president of the union when every guest comes in and knowing that you want them murdered if they're vaguely conservative.
Yeah.
How can that ever work? How can anyone ever come to the even in a practical sense? But also, just to quickly give you Christopher Rufo's take, he was quoting Helen Pluckrose. She says it's illiberal to try and get people fired, blah, blah, blah. He says, don't fall for this broken brain nonsense. Openly celebrating the assassination of a political opponent is itself deeply illiberal and, in fact, must be met with social sanction if one hopes to maintain a liberal system at all. So that's sort of to your point.
That's a kind of paradox, isn't it? In some ways, I suppose that's it's sort of illustrative of the weakness of liberalism, because liberalism is meant to be about sort of tolerance and having a kind of an open society in which people can bring their ideas and so on and so forth. But it raises the question of what you actually do when people bring ideas which are fundamentally objectionable to you. I mean, I don't want to take us off on a tangent, but I think Islam is relevant here as an analogy. Maybe we could talk about that in a bit. But what I was going to say is I think that it's just so insane, isn't it, that we're even having this conversation, because essentially the question we're sort of exploring is how to put this is like, say you were this guy, right, and I was talking to you, like how violent would you actually have to be in order for me to think, actually, I don't want to engage with you anymore in a conversation? Do you see the point? It's like how violent does someone have to be before you say, actually, that's too much? And there's no, in fact, it's not only that I'm not going to debate with you, it's that I'm actually going to avoid even talking to you because you're not interested in a debate. What you're actually interested in is killing me, and this is the guy, and this is crazy, isn't it? Because I don't want to do this. I've never heard of a conservative or a Christian or somebody on the right. I certainly don't know anyone who would advocate, who would say like, well, these liberals, if they keep on saying this stuff, I think we should kill them. I just don't, it's just not the way people think, is it? But this is the way. I'm not saying all of them, but lots of them think like this. They actually think. And this is the thing. This is like, I'm still trying to process it even as we're talking. It's like the veil is like, falling, the scales are falling from my eyes as I'm talking, because I'm thinking this is literally what they think. And when it comes to it, when the rubber hits the road, they actually mean it as well. They mean it. Yeah.
Toby thinks it's speech. No. He wants to kill you. He's saying that. He's celebrating it when you die and people like you. He wants to kill you all. It's not complicated.
Yeah.
And you're going, well, hear him out. What?
Yeah.
I just if that's cancel culture, then I'm in favor of it. If that's the other thing. Oh, this is cancel culture. Okay, then it's not. But cancel culture is really, you didn't agree with the orthodoxy, so we're finding an old tweet to get you fired from your job. Not wanting to murder people, as Michael Knowles has said. This is a baseline level for any kind of society. It's just not in the realm. They're much closer. It's much easier to understand them as terrorists. That's why I keep going back to that.
Yeah.
They're much closer to something like ISIS. I'll tell you why. The celebrate when we look at an innocent Christian man beloved by millions, brutally murdered with a wife and young kids, we are so horrified because that's everything that we believe in. It should just be as the West, not just okay. If you take away the Christian part, everyone should believe in the right to a life and a family and freedom in the West. But they gleefully celebrate it with they're happy. You have to understand how happy they are about it. And so the only people I can think of like that are jihadis, where they're like a suicide bomber or something like that is the worst thing we can conceive of. To them, they're going into heaven and it's amazing. So I say they're much closer in mentality to that. And we have to cut them off with a clear line, not of, well, it's debate. And essentially they're like us on some level, like, I think this, you think this. No, they're something completely different. They are terrorists. Of a completely different mindset, and a lot has been spoken about the West's failure to understand the jihadi mindset, and because we think it's somewhere on the scale of like, okay, they're kind of victims because they're not white, and they're on the scale of our type of thinking. They're not on that spectrum. They're a completely different mind view, worldview, and mindset, and so are these leftists now.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say earlier. I don't know how well I've articulated any of this, but that's what I was trying to say about this kind of this weird way we think about politics, where everything's on some kind of spectrum, and some people are slightly less radical, and some people are slightly more radical, some people left, some people right, or even with the thing with Islam. I mean, I haven't really thought this through, but it's kind of the way people talk about Islam as well, isn't it? It's like, well, there are moderate Muslims, and then there are extreme Muslims. I mean, just with this thing about the left and the right, and I would say with this, the ideology, at least of militant Islam, is it's just really unhelpful to think about it as being on a spectrum. It's like it's perfectly legitimate to just isolate a set of beliefs and say this is evil, full stop. We don't have this in our society. If somebody calls for political assassination, that is something we don't tolerate in our society, full stop. It's not an issue of free speech. It's an issue of people calling for other people to be murdered. And if that means that, a bit like you, if that means that, I'm not in favor of free speech, then I'm not in favor of free speech in that instance. There's an irony here as well, isn't there? Because, and as I say, I feel like I'm just sort of working all this stuff out, but there's an irony because we do have laws against incitement. I mean, I don't believe in like incitement to hatred and stuff like that. I mean, I think all that's nonsense, but incitement to violence, we do have laws against that. But people who get put in prison for that are people who, do an angry tweet after a bunch of children have just been murdered by a Somalian immigrant in a tweet which clearly wasn't in any way meant to incite actual violence and was quickly deleted. That's what you get put in prison for. You don't get put in prison for literally. I mean, I've seen people on TikTok, English people as well, saying, kill them all. It's like, don't just kill Charlie, kill them all.
Yeah,
I've heard people saying kill his family and things like that. Those people aren't in prison.
No, because they're on the side of the regime. Ultimately, the regime. Yeah, exactly. I think things like Lucy Conley, she was upset about murders that had happened, and then she took it down. It didn't actually incite. There's no proof that actually incited anything. Celebrating a murder that's just actually happened, that is much closer to incitement. So yes, on incitement alone, this guy could be in trouble. Actually, in fact, he could be arrested, but I haven't even said that. But that's where there's massive confusion as well. Why is that not incitement? If you're saying it's great to kill people, it's not a massive leap to say, yes, you should kill more people. And as you say, some actually are saying that. People have said kill his wife. It's unbelievable. It should be unbelievable. Of course, I knew about these people. I knew from the Trump attempt what they were like. I've known what they're like. They physically attacked friends of mine in this country with milkshakes. And of course, I know what they're like, but it's still, there is another level. Some people are like, why are you surprised? I think the level of it has been shocking. And for someone so moderate, it would be horrible if it was anyone this was happening with, but for someone so moderate and such an obviously good person, Scott Adams said he was America's son. And it's like, you've done this to our son. And there is a feeling like that.
Yeah.
And he said, finally, the right are united around something, because they really are, from the far right to the moderates, everyone is actually united, and people not on the right, as long as they're not these mentalists.
Yeah.
This is absolutely, is there like a clock on your side or something ticking?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, there was some noise.
I don't know what it is.
Some weird noise is happening.
I can't hear any noise. I live inside a one-way system, so it might be some cars outside or something.
I don't know what it was. No,
yeah.
Go on.
I mean, just to say on that, to be honest with you, I didn't really know Charlie Kirk very well. I didn't follow him, but like in the last week or so, like watching clips and learning more about him, you know, and seeing what people were saying about him, there was a clear sense in which he was the brightest and best of his generation. You know, he was so young, he was so excellent as a debater, and just his manner was fantastic. How he was completely unflappable. And you just look at that guy and you think, this is like a guy who would probably have been the future of the Republican Party. He probably would have been the president. Although it's different politically, there are shades of JFK about this. I mean, obviously, neither of us were alive when that happened, but there is a sense in which America has just been, you know, it's like it's just had the heart ripped out of it through this assassination. It's like an attack on the present, but also the future of America, an attack on the youth of America, and an attack on everything that Charlie Kirk's believed in and that he stood for. You know, I watched this morning, I watched the address that his wife Erica did. I mean, that was phenomenal. I think people would have to just be completely heartless not to watch that and just be in floods of tears.
People have watched it and just said she's weird. People have think that's been the response from these sick people.
I mean, I
know it's a devastating. The bravery of it, unbelievable.
Yeah, they're animated by evil, I think. I mean, I want to go back to the video, but just to say this, I feel like this is a good opportunity to just get a few things off our chest here, hopefully. But the hypocrisy of the left sickens me to my core. How they are constantly talking about compassion and about empathy, about putting yourself in other people's shoes, about, you know, looking out for people who are marginalized and oppressed. And here you've got a woman whose husband of, 31, he's got 2 kids. One of them's 3. I don't know how old the other one is, but young children. He's just been shot in the throat by an assassin. Her whole life has just been completely devastated, you know, and she gives this address, and then people are so heartless to criticize her. I mean, these people are just, you know, as a Christian, I have to pray for my enemies, but, you know, I feel so angry about the hypocrisy of these people. I think the hypocrisy is just disgusting, and it's almost the worst thing about it. I'd prefer it if they just came out and said, we hate you and we want to destroy you, and stopped all this crap about compassion and, you know, love and about empathy, because you have to have something wrong with you. You have to have your empathy faculty turned off to not feel. I feel sorry for anyone, any widow. You know, even if the husband was like a jihadi or something, I'd still feel sorry for the widow. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, what the hell is wrong with you?
That's what I've been struggling with as well. I mean, I wrote it out like this. There's a group of people who think we should listen to all their demands, which are based in claims of moral superiority, but who also think it's fine to murder people and celebrate those murders. That I had to write it out for myself just to get it clear. It's like, their demands are all moral claims about how we should behave and how to be good people. It's like, and so you don't mind openly celebrating a horrific murder, and then you come back to us the next day with your same claims.
Yeah.
Why would we listen to any of your moral claims?
Yeah, we're compassionate, we're tolerant. You know, I've suspected this of the left for a long time, and I think part of the reason I've suspected it is because of the way that they promote abortion. Because to me, that's indicative of a significant lack of empathy for these children that are being murdered, destroyed. They clearly feel pain. They clearly have some kind of proleptic ability to feel fear at these infants that are murdered in the womb. But the left just don't care. You know, they don't care. They just say, well, it's a woman's choice. So they don't care, you know. And so I've thought it for a while, you know, it's been in the back of my mind for a while that there must be something wrong with you to think that. You must lack, on some kind of deep level, you must lack the capacity for empathy if it doesn't even cross your mind that it wouldn't be nice to be a baby in the womb that is torn apart by implements. You know, if you can't understand why that's a problem, there is something wrong with you. you know.
And it's not a very pragmatic and realistic, oh, it's terrible, but sometimes it can't, blah, blah, blah. It's a celebration again.
Yeah,
We see this
exactly.
celebration, which is so sick.
Yeah.
What about this claim that, well, he believed in genocide because he supported Israel, therefore it's justified?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't really know enough about what he said about Israel, but I don't accept that kind of logic. I mean, this is sort of takes us into that whole question about Israel, Palestine. I'm always really sort of hesitant to because I just think it's so complicated, and I just, do you know what I mean? I just don't really feel like I have the competency or the expertise to really comment on it. So I don't know, but I don't think that he or anyone else who thinks that the response of Israel to what happened on October the 7th, I don't think anyone who thinks that is actually, sorry, my son's just walked in, is actually promoting genocide. Or maybe some people are, but I think that the average person who thinks that the response is proportional. And I'm sure that that's the way that Charlie Kirk would have justified it. So I think it just takes us back to that point, doesn't it? Which is that, and again, it's the craziness of the situation. It's like, even if he did think that, the way of dealing with it is not by shooting him in the neck. It's by debate. It's by open debate.
And he was changing his mind on it, which has led some people to say that Israel are actually behind this, which maybe we won't get into, probably get taken off YouTube or something. Not that I believe that, but that's one way they justify it. What about the Christian response? You mentioned this praying for your enemies, because I've been so full of rage and pure hatred for these people that I go, what is this? What is the response? Because people are getting them sacked and things, which I think is actually fine. But how does a Christian respond when you're faced with this kind of level of evil?
Well, I think there are a number of things here. And I mean, feel free to ask me sort of further about any particular aspect of this, because there's a kind of judicial question over things like the death penalty and things like that, which I think those are important questions. But I think, just to share a couple of reflections, from a sort of personal pastoral viewpoint, I've been recently reading Psalm 139, which is one of my favorite Psalms. And it's very famous Psalm. Just look it up here. I've just got my Book of Common Prayer with some very famous parts in it, speaking about God's love and His care for us, throughout our lives, from the time we're in our mother's womb, throughout all our days and so on. But at the end of Psalm 139, it switches into the imprecatory mode, which is about, it happens many times in the Psalms, and it's when the writer of the Psalm calls down God's judgment on His enemies. So it just starts, "Will thou not slay the wicked, O God? Depart from me, ye bloodthirsty men, for they speak unrighteously against thee, and thine enemies take thy name in vain. Do I not hate them, O Lord, that hate thee? And am not I grieved with those that rise up against thee? Yea, I hate them right sore, even as though they were mine enemies." And there's quite a lot of discussion over the imprecatory Psalms, or the imprecatory parts of the Psalms, as to what we do with those now, because Christ taught us to love our enemies, to pray for those who persecute us, and essentially to seek to do good to those who wish us evil. And I think that's a fundamental commitment of a follower of Christ. So there are a couple of things here. The imprecatory Psalms, what are they for? I think they're to help us in our prayers now. They give us permission to be honest with God as to how we feel. If David could say those things, King David could say those things, and other writers of the Psalms could say those things to God, we can say those things too. We can be honest with God. We want to see justice done. We want to see the wicked thwarted in their evil deeds, and we want this kind of thing to stop, and the people who do it to be stopped in their tracks. So I think that's sort of number one. There is a way of praying where we can truly unburden our hearts before God. However, we do need to also somehow come to a place where we can genuinely pray for our enemies, that they would be reconciled to God, that they would come to a place of repentance, and that they would be spared from the judgment that is otherwise going to be visited upon them. That's a really, really hard thing. I'm not saying that, I've necessarily come to that place myself over all of this stuff. As I said earlier, I feel so angry about it. But I think what we have to do is we have to place the message of the gospel before ourselves, which is that Christ died for all of us. The cross is for all of us, his sacrificial death, his atoning death. Why is the cross so brutal and awful and terrible and horrific? It's because that is the price Christ had to pay for our sin. My sin, your sin, everybody's sin. People on the left, radical leftists, people who celebrate Charlie Kirk's death. That sacrifice is sufficient for the sin of the whole world. And that is our only hope before God, is to plead the blood of Christ. We don't come to God because of our own moral righteousness or our own virtue. We come because of the cross of Christ. So that's true, as I say, for me, it's true for you, it's true for everyone on the planet. And it's true for our political opponents as well. It's true for those people who make themselves our enemies. Now, the logic is always that way. In the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against one another. The Apostle Paul says, forgive one another as God in Christ has forgiven you. That's the way the logic always is. God has forgiven us. We're to forgive others. We're guilty of great sin before God. Other people may be guilty of great sin against us, but we have to forgive as God has forgiven us. So that's the heart of God. But as I say, that takes a sort of supernatural transformation of the heart, which I think can only be affected by the power of God. So that would be a sort of start of 10.
Interesting. Yeah. And there's, the thing I was saying, by the way, is me on your side, which sometimes pops up, but it's not a big deal. So there's all sorts of thoughts in my mind there. One is this idea that actually you could still punish people even with the death penalty and still not hate them, which is a sort of
there's definitely
it's philosophical question, but
it's got to be that way, though. It's got to be that way. It's like war, like just war theory incorporates this from a Christian perspective as well. Is that it's possible to kill someone in war, but not out of hatred, out of love.
But of course,
it's the same thing with capital punishment. It's that you execute the person, you can still love the person, but you can still believe that it is just to execute somebody who has committed a capital crime. It's also love. It's also a demonstration of love for those who live in the society, some of whom, are family members and so on, but just in general, in order to keep order in society. So sorry I interrupted you, but I think that's
no, because that was a stray thought that it's getting ahead of myself, but that would only apply to the killer anyway. It wouldn't apply to all these other people. So when you were talking there, I was thinking about what you were saying, but also about repentance. And in relation to Scott Adams's tweet, he said, wait until the haters of Charlie Kirk find out their anger is based entirely on quotes taken out of context and flat out lies about what he said. Cognitive dissonance will glue most of the haters to their original positions with word salad explanations of how they've been proven wrong, yet they are really right. And we've seen loads of that. But some will experience unbearable sadness and deep shame over their actions this week. That's coming. And maybe we saw a little bit of that even from Stephen King, and maybe perhaps Alistair Campbell privately will feel like that. But that'll be interesting if they do reach any repentance, when that kicks in. Now, and it ties with some other thoughts I've been thinking of, that these people, there can't be that many psychopaths out there, clinical psychopaths. So these people are more like people in a cult. And people in a cult can do extraordinary things, and they can justify murder, they can justify mass suicide and all this. But they can come out of the cult in some cases.
Yeah.
But then we don't absolve them of their crimes. That's the key thing as well. So think of the actress from Smallville who was in that cult. She still got prosecuted, as far as I remember. You're in a cult. You're in the Manson cult. Manson's, well, of course he went to prison, but also the people who did that have to go to prison. So you can be in a cult and we can say, okay, you're out of the cult now, but you've still committed crimes. Although here they haven't committed crimes necessarily because they've done something horrific, which is celebrating murder. We cannot forgive them for that. Well, we can get forgiveness makes it more complicated in a Christian context. Let's say we're not going to forget that. But what do we do? What do we do if they do come to realizing how horrific it was, or if they don't?
Well, if they do, so I think it's important to say that there's a distinction between a sin and a crime. So a crime, I mean, I'm not saying a crime has to always be punished, because we do have I mean, your lawyer friend, I forget his name, he was talking about this, wasn't he, about the sort of English way of meting out justice, which isn't necessarily, extremely rigid. It takes into account various things. So I'm not saying crimes always have to be punished, but nevertheless, crimes are treated in a different way to sin, right? So crime is something that has to be punished, and the law has to be enforced in order to mete out justice and in order to keep order in society. So that's one thing. Sin is different. Sin is committed against God, or it's committed against other people, and sin can be sin is a different category in that sense. So, if you commit a crime against me, you will need to face the force of the law. But I can also forgive you, and you can ask for my forgiveness, and I can offer it to you, and we can be reconciled, and I can, in a sense, forget about what you've done, and I can just consider it as though it didn't happen. So that's different to the law in that sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then I suddenly started thinking, this is all well and good, Nick, but we still also have to survive and defend ourselves. I mean, we have to not get killed by these people, or we have to not be attacked by them in various ways. I
mean, I was thinking about this in a sense. Yeah, obviously, one wants to take precautions, and there's a history of, in the sort of history of Christian thinking about martyrdom, the basic thinking, and this is, by the way, this is where it's different to the kind of jihadi martyrdom. It's a really, really important point to make, is that we Christians do not seek martyrdom. We do not seek it on purpose. We can have different attitudes towards it. I suppose, a figure like Ignatius of Antioch was famous, the 2nd century figure, was famously really committed to his martyrdom in a particular way. But Christians have never sought martyrdom as something which they sort of intentionally try and bring about. Martyrdom is always something that's visited upon us from elsewhere, like it was from Charlie. He was very brave, but he wasn't seeking to get shot in the neck. That was the decision of the guy who did it. It wasn't Charlie's decision. So we don't seek it. However, I'm trying to think of how to put this. We live in a society in which it's never been an existential reality that we could genuinely be murdered for manifesting the faith. It's never been a reality in the modern West, really, has it? I mean, apart from maybe the threat of Islamic terrorism, but maybe we're moving into a time where to manifest Christ publicly is going to have more of a cost associated with it. And of course, we don't want that to happen, and we should seek to stop it happening. But at the same time, we have to continue to be bold and to honor the legacy of people like Charlie, who did witness for Christ and who did give his life for Christ and for what he believed in. And that may involve putting ourselves in harm's way. Now, as I say, not in any way is that, and people would have to twist what I've just said in order to reach this conclusion, but not in any way is that some kind of incitement for people to kill Christians or to commit violent acts or anything like that. I'm just saying it might become a reality. And in some sense, you might say that what happened last week makes it more of a reality than it was previously.
Well, one take I had was that Charlie was embodying is the wrong word. I can't remember the word I used, but he was I can't remember the word I used, but in the sense he was Christ-like in the response. He was trying to follow the example of Christ. I think how I said it, and in a strange way, the way he's been treated does echo that. The evil, being killed. Of course, now you say people
and the lies as well. Sorry to interrupt, but the lies people are telling about and the slandering. Christ says, like, rejoice when people say all kinds of evil against you. in my name. That's exactly what's happened to Charlie Kirk. There are just lies and lies and lies everywhere about him. Sorry, just carry on, please.
You know, it's fascinating that you see a truly good person, and still the world treats him like this in this fallen world. It's fascinating that nothing's changed there,
Yeah.
of course. And but I've got a couple of questions, and they're very different.
Yeah.
One is, didn't Christ seek martyrdom because he knew it was going to happen, and he went for it anyway? That's a big theological question. The second question is more of a comment, actually. You say that it's going to happen for manifesting the faith, but they're saying get Ben Shapiro next. Now, Ben Shapiro said very offensive things about Christ and is a Jewish, Orthodox Jewish person, not or whatever you call it, it's sort of conservative Jewish person, not a Christian. So it's anyone actually not even, I know it's out of your sort of realm as well, but still in your realm as a more conservative person. Conservatives can be killed as well.
Yeah. So, people can be political martyrs as well as religious martyrs, I suppose, Christian martyrs. Absolutely. I just believe that this is fundamentally spiritual warfare. I think that this is, it's clearly an attack on a Christian who is openly manifesting his faith, saying the kinds of things that the radical left, who are animated by spiritual forces, didn't want to hear. And they, as a result of these diabolical impulses, they murdered him. So that to me is an issue of spiritual warfare. And so in that sense, I think that is I believe that this is a Christian martyrdom, and I think we could see more of these kinds of things. I know it's tricky to, pass, what was specifically Christianity and what was specifically politics, but I think with Charlie, it's just so obvious that his politics was animated by his faith and informed by it. I'd compare him to someone like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was in some ways a political activist, but he was, a Lutheran pastor and a deeply committed Christian. And there may be political martyrs as well, such as Shapiro. That might happen as well. But
you're absolutely right that they were attacking him on his basis of his Christianity, and you can see that in all the things they're saying about him, stoning gay people to death, which is because he didn't believe, and just the things they're accusing him of are sort of largely Christian beliefs. Some are maybe conservative beliefs, but yeah, they're definitely.
But they're all to do with things like the family, heterosexuality and homosexuality, about transgenderism, abortion. They're all to do with that matrix of issues, which is, it's the sort of the diabolical set of beliefs that the left hold around, particularly around family, sexuality, men and women and children, all of that stuff. And I've always said this is where the warfare is at its fiercest, around those issues. This is where Satan is applying the pressure in our civilization. And as I've probably said this to you before, a lot of it is about the destruction of children and childhood and the innocence of childhood, which is something that Charlie obviously was a family man with young children, and it was a pro-life advocate, and we really should acknowledge the fact that this is an attack on the young as much as it's an attack on anything else. So sorry to interrupt, but I think that's important to say.
No, it's really interesting, and like say Nick Fuentes, because I watched him. I watched everything on this. He was the first person I heard talking about it, because he said pray for Charlie Kirk, and then he said this was like a nightmare, and he said how horrible it was. He did a whole show, and he said I fiercely disagreed with him. He hated me, or he never had a good word to say about me. We feuded. I disagreed with him completely on politics, because of course one is pro-Israel, one is anti-Israel, and so on. But he said, but actually he was ultimately murdered for what I do believe in, which is preaching Christianity and all these key facets you're talking about. So that is what is bringing much of the American right together. Other people are brought together on the political side of it, but it was the reason. And some of the conspiracy theorists will say this is all too convenient, and it's not true. But what we know so far is that he was in this relationship, the killer, with someone who seemed to be into some quite deviant sexual subcultures like furryism, which I don't really understand, but know broadly what it is. And the guy was transitioning, his so-called partner was transitioning and you go like, it's a hatred of the sort of, what would you say, what Danny Kruger called the normative family, I suppose.
Yeah, I just think it's I mean, it's a hatred of, well, I mean, it's not just one thing. It's a constellation of connected things. It's a hatred of a normal family setup, you know, a man and a woman and children. It's a hatred of that. And in some ways, like, the hatred there stems from people's selfishness and their unwillingness to enter into such a situation because they, you know, they're so selfish, they don't want to have children, and they can't stand the sacrifice of having children, and they consider it a limitation upon them. Same thing, you know, for marriage to a certain extent. You know, it's obvious how abortion is connected to all of this. So it's a hatred of that. It's a hatred of being told that you can't have sex with anyone in any way you want at any time. You know, that's seen as a sort of curtailment of people's freedom. So it's a hatred of that. It's basically a hatred of God, really, because it's a hatred of God telling you, you know, what to do. This is how you're created. This is what you're created for. You know, sex within marriage or celibacy. If you're married, you should have children and raise them. It's a sin, a terrible sin, to abort your children. You're not a woman. You're not a man. You can't just chop your genitals off and become one. And, you know, various other things of that sort. You know, people hate this because they see it as a curtailment of their freedom. And, you know, I mean, not to get too philosophical about this, but I do ultimately think that that's the animating idea behind all of it on an individual level. It's essentially a sort of manifestation of that transhuman impulse, which is that I can just be whatever I want, whenever I want, with whoever I want, and I can do it whatever I want, even to the extent of being liberated from my own biology. It's fundamentally diabolical. It's a rebellion against God's authority over his own creation.
There's also extreme narcissism. For example, I keep mentioning Fuentes in a bid to get this taken off YouTube, but he is someone with who, you know, calls himself an incel and stuff. He's completely single, never even had a girlfriend and so on. I have had lots of a normal amount of girlfriends, but I'm completely single with no children. But we don't want to, he's Christian, and we don't want to harm anyone else. And I can always understand that in my own failings or quirks are nothing to do with what should happen. So one thing I find extraordinary is always, I want to live this lifestyle, and therefore you're evil and I should kill you or I should attack you. It's like, just because I've not managed to have children or family, I still recognize that it's good and wholesome. So there's something else really wrong with them there. I've been so angry about the selfishness of the killer and the narcissism and the resentment and the plotting that goes on. And like, yeah, we're totally right to be doing this. That makes me so angry as well. Like, you thought you could take someone's father away. It's obvious, but it makes me so angry, the selfishness of it. Why would you think you could do that just because of your degenerate lifestyle? So there's something else going on as well there.
I mean, let me just answer that, if that's okay. So, I mean, firstly, I'm not that I'm saying you're saying this, but just to be clear, in the Christian view, a single lifestyle is not aberrant. It's a perfectly legitimate thing. And, you know, I know I've said to you, the Apostle Paul talks about how it's actually superior to being married for various reasons. And of course, our Lord Jesus was never married. And, you know, you could bring out numerous other examples as well. So it's just in this sphere where we're talking about sex and the family and things like that, that's where my comments apply. The psychological thing you mentioned, I think, is spoken about in Scripture in Romans chapter 1, which is one of the most controversial chapters in all of the New Testament, because it speaks about these kinds of things. And at the end of that chapter, the Apostle Paul says that these kinds of people, these people who exchange the truth about God for a lie and worship and serve the creature rather than the creator, that these people not only do these things, but they praise the people who do the same. And I think that's a really, really important psychological insight, because another thing Paul says there, which is important to say, is that they know the truth about God, but they suppress the truth in unrighteousness. And this is part of the reason that they all celebrate each other, because it's in celebrating each other they can further suppress the truth, because it gives them a sense of solidarity. You know, we together believe this, we together are right. But on some level, and I'm not saying they know it consciously, but on some level they know deep down that they are in rebellion against God and against his order for creation. They know it on some level, and so they justify each other, they celebrate each other, and they view it as a threat when anyone doesn't agree with them. This is why they hate people disagreeing with them to the extent they do, because it's pressing something. It's pressing against their conscience. You know, they're having their conscience pricked by that. That's what I think. They know on some level that their viewpoints are shameful and sinful, and they are in rebellion against God. And so when people come along and they don't praise them, they don't do the same things as them. That's the thing. It's not even that they're not praising them, it's they're not doing the same things. It's like, you know, I've got a family with small kids. It's like that in itself is enough. Like I've got 4 small children. That in itself is enough for certain people to hate and despise me and people like me. You don't even have to say anything.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a sort of living rebuke to them in their minds. I mean, the idea that, for example, if you think you're trans and someone like Charlie Kirk is quite sort of charismatically and articulately saying you're not, it's not real, that's obviously going to trigger you. As you say, but even the existence of someone like that.
Yeah.
But
why would it trigger you? That's the thing. It's like, oh, you know, I'm trying to think about this. Like, just to be fair, like sometimes I get annoyed when people contradict me and I find their viewpoints irritating, right? But it's a very passing thing. I don't experience it as a kind of attack on my identity. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a normal level to which you can be annoyed by people contradicting you and having different views. But the kind of triggering you're talking about so often seems to me to be some kind of fundamental attack on your identity. I mean, just to, you know, flip it around, someone comes along and says, oh, there's no God, yeah, God's not real, the Bible's a load of nonsense, Jesus, you know, isn't who he said he was. I'd be like, okay, fine, that's what you think. You know, I don't agree with you, obviously, but you think that if you like. It doesn't threaten me at all. Why does it threaten these people to just have people not believe what they believe?
Yeah, you could almost say a utopianism, but then it's a very dark vision, isn't it? It's like everyone has to. Something on the left is like everyone has to go along and believe this. That's utopian is such a strange word in this context because their vision is so obviously evil, but everyone has to go along with it. It's totalizing and top down. It's very strange. The thing I didn't get the answer on though is didn't Christ plan his own martyrdom?
No, I would say no, actually. So, I mean, this does take us into sort of some interesting Christological questions about the interplay between Christ's divinity and his humanity, because, of course, the Orthodox Christian position is that Christ was both fully man and fully God. So as man, it's an interesting question to think about, you know, what were his limitations in terms of foreknowledge? You know, did he always know about the crucifixion and so on, or did he learn about it? Did he understand it more as he was growing up and so on and so forth? But I would say just an observation about this is that Christ, at least in his humanity, if it makes sense to talk about that, very much did not want to go to the cross. And you could see that in the Garden of Gethsemane when he prays 3 times to the Father to remove the chalice of suffering from him, and then says, but nevertheless, not as my will, but your will be done. So it's actually God the Father's. I mean, if it makes sense to talk about this like this, because one doesn't want to sort of divide the Trinity too much and make out that there are different wills in God. But Christ, at least in his humanity, very much did not want to go to the cross and felt the suffering of not only the cross itself, but of not wanting it, of the anticipation of martyrdom. So I would say there was a willingness in Christ to be obedient, but he didn't plan his own martyrdom in that sense. And also within the mysterious providence of God, it was visited upon him through the actions of the Jewish leaders, Judas Iscariot, Pontius Pilate, and the Romans, and so on. Okay. So that would be kind of where I'd start with that, I suppose.
Very interesting.
So just develop that one more step. Providentially, what that shows is that God uses the actions of evil people for his purposes, as he uses absolutely everything for his purposes. But it's not necessarily to say that he always wants everything to happen in the way that it does, or that's always the will of God for things to happen in the way that they do. Although, of course, the crucifixion of Christ was, it was God's plan from, eternity past. So, I mean, these are quite complicated issues, but yeah, that's where I'd start.
Okay, thank you very much. It's and Charlie knew about the threats to him. They were well documented. He had a security team, but he still went out anyway and did this. Like you say, with him, I don't believe it in any sense either. Did he wanted anything like this? Of course, he didn't want this to happen. That's absurd. But he was just basically brave anyway, and he seemed to be buoyed by his Christian belief in that bravery.
Yeah.
I mean, Ben Shapiro's not going to do outdoor events anymore. It's amazing that Trump came back to do outdoor events. Perhaps it was too brave. I don't know.
Yeah, it was interesting, the Erica Kirk speech she gave. I don't know, did you hear Gad Saad's, he put on his podcast, I don't know whether you follow him, but on his podcast, he did a little reaction to it. And as far as I know, Gad Saad, I mean, he's obviously Jewish, but he's not a Christian. And it was just interesting. And also he seems to me to be quite a secular Jew, like he sort of evaluates everything from an evolutionary perspective. But he said, he was being interviewed by someone, and he said that he found the grace and the poise of Erica to be inexplicable. And he said it was almost like she must be inexplicable from an evolutionary perspective. And it was almost as though she was being animated by some kind of supernatural power to do such a thing. And I thought that was a remarkable thing to say, because, of course, in that address, she spoke about continuing the work that Charlie had been doing, about how these various events were going to continue and Turning Point USA was going to continue, and so on and so forth. But that in itself is, I mean, can you imagine if your husband had just been murdered and you just say, well, we're just going to carry on. We're just going to carry on going now. I mean, that's bravery, on so many levels.
It was incredibly brave. I mean, I don't mind saying I considered, one of my first thoughts was, do I even want to do politics? Because these are the stakes and it's this horrific. And, I've been dragged into it. I was just doing comedy, just wanted to be left alone. So one thought what I had at least is, do I want to do this crap anymore? It's just like, because it's so ugly and so dangerous and so evil. And you just like, it is. So yeah, for her to carry on like that and say yes and be that defiant was extraordinary. And I still feel that way. I still feel like every day I'm just looking at this garbage from not only the horrible thing that happened to Charlie and the grief I felt, which has been similar to a family member. I mean, I was thinking about it. Scott Adams said he's America's son, and I was thinking, okay, America's Uncle Sam. And then he's our cousin, therefore. Then I thought my own cousin did die in a very shocking way of suicide at age 17, and I remember the pain of that. And I remember it's not that different. Yeah. The pain of this is so great, and the evil. Having to follow politics anyway is incredibly miserable, because we don't get anything our way on immigration and all these things, and we're constantly there's two-tier justice, which we're second-class citizens, we're hated by the current elite, and so on. And Starmer's confirmed that with his response to the marches just yesterday. But this is another level where it's like I'm having to look at people celebrating this horrific murder of a family man. It's like, and I'm having to. You say, are you having to? You could touch grass and get offline. Yeah, but this is the world I'm embroiled in. To some people, they didn't even know this had happened. They're going on doing their normal things. They didn't know who he was. And I'm thinking, wow, those people are blissful ignorance. They're just not in politics, especially in this country. They don't know about it. But for me and all my friends, we are in it, and we're having to face it. And the weight of that is so miserable. I'm like, I am miserable and angry and sad every day, and I see no end to that. I can't remember why I started on that point. Oh yes, just the bravery to carry on, therefore, particularly for Erica, but almost for anyone. You're like, do I want this? And is there my second thought came when I first thought I want to get out of this. My second thought was, well, is there a way out? Because America's only moving towards more violence and chaos and division, and so is this country, Britain. So I don't see a way out anyway of politics, because our societies are devolving into evil and chaos. And so is there a way out anyway? Probably not.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel that way sometimes as well. Yeah, I felt really down last week. Not just for this, but this was definitely not just for this reason, but this definitely didn't help. And sometimes, yeah, one does have periods of despair. I mean, when you're talking there, the line from the Lord of the Rings about, Gandalf's line about, we don't choose the times we live in, but we have to use the time that's given to us, whatever it is. What is that line? We don't choose the times we live in. All we can do is choose how to use the time that's given to us. Is that it?
Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's it, isn't it? That's very wise. And it's true of us. In many ways, it's the perennial human temptation to just think, well, it's mine. It's like, if I lived in, the 13th century Oxford or something, everything would be fine. It would be great. But choose your time period. There's always an escape that we can elicit in our own minds. But that's not the world we live in. The world we live in is the world today. And somehow we've got to find the strength and the hope within ourselves and the tenacity to bring light to the world. And, I think the thing about this is that, I mean, I saw somebody saying this about Charlie. I think it was Matt Goodwin, but he was quoting someone else. He was talking about this saying, which is that the saying was something like, they thought they could bury him, but they didn't realize he was a seed. And that's a deeply Christian idea, by the way, because that's essentially what Christ says about himself. Unless a seed falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Speaking about his death and resurrection. But the tradition of Christian martyrdom is a participation in the death and resurrection of Christ for that reason. It's that it's not just death, it's life and greater life that comes about as a result afterwards. And, when I watched Charlie's widow talking, and she was saying, I mean, she said something absolutely amazing. She said something like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like the cry of this widow will echo across the nations or something like that. And she said to his enemies and to the people who did this, you have no idea what you've just unleashed. I think that's, if you can find some motivation in that, I'd encourage you to do it, because I find motivation in that. I just think, well, it's very, very easy to be just absolutely paralyzed by all of this horrible evil and all of this stuff that's going on, and just by the heaviness and the difficulty of life, which, it goes along with that. It's like things are hard enough anyway, but then something like this happens and you're just like, oh my goodness, like, how much more of this can I take? It's very, very easy to be paralyzed by that. It's very easy to be overcome by that. But the way to honor the legacy of people like Charlie Kirk is to do the complete opposite, and to use this as motivation to bring the light into the world that he was attempting to bring into the world, and that's why his death will actually ultimately bring about greater good than even if he'd stayed alive, which is an absolutely amazing thing to say. But the reason I think it's an okay thing to say is because that was also true of Christ, and that's the way it is. It's death followed by new life, new birth. So that's the way I think we must honor Charlie. We must honor his widow. I don't know his widow, but I just felt such a deep human connection with her. And maybe it sounds melodramatic. I don't know. Maybe it will sound melodramatic to your listeners, but I just thought, well, I'm going to honor you by continuing doing what I'm doing, No,
that's how I felt as well. After my initial despair, I did rally. Yeah, she said the cries of this widow will echo around the world like a battle cry. The movement my husband built will not die. And I feel that way as well. I feel the righteous anger of it. I don't know where that sits in Christianity, but I feel like, okay, I've had my despair, but also, tell you what, I am going to fight you scumbags. When I look at them, and that does tend to rally in me. This is why I end up doing this stuff. Yeah. And I've toned it down because you're a vicar, but I was like, I am going to, but I don't know what it means, because I was walking around where I live, and I'm certainly not going to dox myself now, but it's certainly not a conservative area. And I was thinking, how many of these people want me dead? Because we know it's teachers, we know it's professors, we know it's ordinary people everywhere. And I was thinking, Of course, I'm not as famous as Charlie, but how many would if they knew my views? I was thinking, is it half? I don't know. It's like it's not zero. So I'm like, that's a very strange feeling. But like you say, it has ignited something. I mean, I prayed for Charlie and his family on that night, and I don't normally even pray. I've told you before about rubbish I am, all this. And the amount of people I've seen going to church, I've seen online people are going to churches and they're packed. So, and they did really pick the wrong person, unless they wanted to do this in some sick way. I think they really did pick the wrong person in that sense, because it's like, you have, as Scott Adams says, you've united us now. You haven't picked someone where they're really out there and people might go, that's terrible, but I don't know if I want to sacrifice for that person. You pick someone who just rallies everyone by clearly a good, innocent person who did things the right way, did everything right, didn't have to agree with them on every point, but he made his points well and in good faith. And you go, okay, that's the person, is it? Okay, well then you are pure evil and we are going to all fight.
Yeah, well, the devil overplays his hand, doesn't it? And I think that's what's happened here. I mean, again, there's something so deeply Christological about this. This is something, like the Apostle Paul says this, if they had understood these things, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. If they'd understood, if Satan and his host of diabolical wickedness have understood what was going to happen when the cross, after the cross, they wouldn't have done it, because they would have understood that it wouldn't have been good for them. And it's the same with a situation like this. Good will come about as a result of this, and that's what these wicked people have brought about. That's what they don't understand. They don't understand. She's so right. She was so right about that. What she said, it was just the perfect thing to say. It really was.
Yeah, and there's already punishments being meted out for all these people who celebrated it, and they've been banned from the United States. They're losing their jobs. And actually, it is right. People are, it's cancel culture. Actually, whatever. This is something very different. This is another level. It's like, and these people will be punished for this, and that's just how it is. But not that. Yeah. Then we get into like whether you should revel in their punishment. Then we get to a whole other Christian debate. But I think that's a good place to end. We've done over an hour, and I think I will just release this for everyone so they can listen, and in case it helps anyone, because I did one episode with Simon Evans and there's this episode. I think I will just release it let everyone hear this, and we'll release it on both our channels, and so the maximum number of people can hear. Not really me, because I'm not an expert, but your Christian insights on this, I think, will help a lot of people. So thank you very much. And where do you want to send people, Jamie?
Well, people can find my podcast, which is called Irreverent Faith and Current Affairs. If they want, you can just type that into Google, but our website is irreverentpod.com. I am on Twitter, Jamie Franklin 40. I have a blog, jamiefranklin.substack.com. And I am a vicar as well. So I have a church. I'm the priest in charge in a church in Winchester called Holy Trinity Church, which is right in the city of Winchester. So if you're looking to come to church, I mean, that's what I'd like you to do more than anything else, if I'm honest, rather than sign up for my blog or listen to the podcast, come to church, mine or somebody else's. But yeah, in Winchester here, come along. I'm an Anglican vicar. I'm an Anglo-Catholic, so it's kind of high church thing, but very legit. And you'd be very welcome to come along if you'd like to visit. So that's where you can find me. And for you on my channel as well.
Yes. And I'm on nickdixon.net, but as I say, I'll put these ones out for free. I can't put everything out for free because then the paid members will be hard done by. But we'll put out this, and I would also say go to church.
Yeah.
And if you have to do one thing, but if you do two, go to nickdixon.net. Thank you very much, Jamie. Hopefully this helps someone, and God bless everyone. Keep fighting against the evil we see, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you as ever.